Petria, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me and sort of talk about your story. Our listeners are going to hear about your organisation that you're going to embed and talk about, and then how you embed polyvagal theory and the Safe and Sound protocol in your organisation. So, but first of all, just tell us a little bit about your background and how the kind of work you do and how you come to work at Stand for Children.
Yeah. So I guess I've been with Stand Tumaya for about 15, going on 18 years. I started in 2005 and I was actually teacher trained. So I was working in a coordination role between schools and Stand. And back then it was health camps. Okay. So we were health camps from 1919. So it's very, very old. But I was working in a coordination role between parents and schools, really. And I worked in that role. And but while I was doing my teacher training, I got really interested in psychology. So I got the psychologist bug and started down that line and became a registered psychologist. So throughout my journey with Stand, I've morphed into a psychologist, and I ended up doing my PhD as well. So I did my PhD with out-of-home care kids and looking at research methodologies and the ethics of actually interviewing children that are in care, but also the protocols. So that took me down that line. And then when I was just writing up my last chapter on my PhD, we ended up doing a training in Theraplay. So I don't know if you've heard of Theraplay, but Theraplay is a play therapy, which is, well, a form of play therapy. It's very adult-led and directed. But we started using that, and that became what we did at Stand Tumaya. There's a version of that, Sunshine Circles, and group Theraplay. We work with groups of children all the time. And so therefore it just fit with us. So I started rolling that out across the whole organisation, and that led me to neurobiology, neuroscience, trauma, more in-depth trauma. Throughout that process, we had the earthquakes, the 2011 earthquakes. We then had the fires and the mosque shootings in the same year. And so it really shifted the way that we worked. So Stand Tumaya used to be a residential setup where we'd have children come to us for 4 weeks. They'd stay 24/7, and we tended to just work with them and their parents, and very little work with their parents back then. But after the earthquakes, that shifted how we could work with children. And it was really hard to separate them from their parents, and parents to be separated from their children, and all of those sorts of things.
And I'm sure the pandemic probably had an impact too then on how Stand practiced.
Yeah, well, based in Christchurch. I'm based in Christchurch, where we had the earthquakes and the shootings. So it's just been a roll-on for us. And the good thing about that, if you can say there's anything good, is we've built resilience as a community. So for us, the pandemic, I felt, didn't have as severe impact as it did worldwide, because we were already built up some resilience through community. And when I talk to people that left after the earthquakes and people that stayed healed as a community, and people that moved sort of got stuck in that trauma and tended to develop post-traumatic stress disorder from that incident.
Right. Yeah.
So that's just in my understanding and the people that I've met and talked to in my journey around the earthquakes. But it has highlighted how powerful relationship is in healing, and how powerful relationship is towards resilience, building resilience. So Theraplay is a relational attachment intervention. So it made sense that that's what we do. We heal through relationship in Stand Tumaya, and we've been doing that for many, many years. So I
So-
guess just to give you some more information about STAND, I guess.
Yes, yes. That was
So-
exactly going to be my next question. So let's just talk. And I'm so glad that you brought up those different, those traumas that have, happened in New Zealand, because that was actually what I was going to, help us sort of get to in our chat, to sort of unpack a bit about what have you noticed in the kids based on those traumas. But let's come back to that, and let's just unpack STAND, because I know our relationship with you guys over the years has just expanded in terms of how many therapists are actually being trained in the Safe and Sound protocol. So please talk about that journey of, because obviously STAND has expanded over the years.
Yeah. So STAND has really been as big as it's been forever. But I think, like I said, 1919, it was first developed as health camps dealing with children that had health issues, asthma, diabetes, those sorts of concerns. Then it became a place that tended to attract children that were badly behaved, what people called badly behaved. And then post the earthquakes, we really started to refine our practice around trauma. But STAND has always been dedicated to healing relationships, healing relational trauma through relationship. And so we talk about our tamariki, children, whānau, family, mokopuna, grandchildren. So we're talking about generational trauma, generational adverse effects. And we do that through what we call tamatatia and tiakana, and that is restoration and preservation. And the viewers and the people that are listening to this can actually go onto our website and have a really good look around. So that's STAND for Children, STAND FOR children.org.nz. Go in and have a look around. We've got some really interesting stats with regards to multiple adverse events in the children's lives and the people that we actually deal with, and walk alongside. So it is about restoration, restoring from those events that they've experienced and how they can get back to reducing toxic stress, I guess, and increasing resilience at the same time. So trying to help them to,
So I'm just going to interrupt a little bit and just have you explain a little bit about some of that native language that you just used then.
So we have a Treaty of Waitangi, which is a treaty between Māori and Pākehā or English, and so we work towards rectifying that treaty, because there have been some injustices, lots of injustices done, and there has been a lot of racism in this country, and there still is. So we're always about restoration and restitution of the treaty. We work very biculturally, so we have we interweave the traditions and the protocols and the tikanga of Māori with what we know in research and evidence that comes from the Western world, I guess. So there's a weaving together of that knowledge.
I like that. Yes.
So and so we are always, and te reo is the language of the Māori people there, and that is where their sovereignty lies, where they as an identity and people lie, and we're all responsible to keep that alive. And it's a very valued treasure of Aotearoa, New Zealand. It is something that we do treasure here, and we all work together, and especially Stand to Maya. That is something that we really strive to work towards and work together in collaboratively to grow that and manage that towards our tamariki and our whānau.
And I really appreciate you sharing that, because I'm sure there's listeners around the world who are listening. And I know even within Australia, there is more of a move towards trying to embed more of our native culture in different organisations. And it sounds like Stand might be a nice model for people to look through, because it sounds like it's very much embedded within that organisation. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that extra information, because I'm sure the native peoples in Canada and across the US and other cultures. So nice to have that within your organisation.
Yeah, well, it's something that we really value, and we learn and we grow together, and it benefits all of us. So that's something, and it helps us with our understanding too of the different experiences. Nobody experiences trauma as the same as anybody else. So the experiences of trauma are quite individualized. So we need to be open to really understanding our clients and our tamariki and our whānau to be able to walk alongside them and empower them and grow them through what is not of their fault. Like, trauma is something that happened to them. It is not them, right? And so it's really about recognizing that as well, and recognizing the strengths within our children and what they bring, and then building on those. So yeah, so it is really important, and so that brings us to what our visions and our goals are, and our missions and our values and principles at Stand to Maya. So we talk about supporting the development of responsive relationships. So those relationships that have that serve and return. We talk about reducing sources of stress in their life, so talking about reducing that toxic stress. Now, some of that stress comes from within, and we know that through the way our polyvagal system can function and get stuck and is so inflexible that it creates even more stress, which can create more adversity and more trauma. And then we're looking at strengthening that self-regulation core, which can then feed the core executive skills and building that. And because then you can function better in life, you can relate better in life, you can learn better in life. And of course, this all starts to lead back to the power of SSP, right? When we're talking about these things. So, and our client group, or the people that we work with, anybody that's experienced multiple forms of adversity. So within that, we've got several teams. We've got our school social services, which is social workers in schools, and we have mana aki, which is a team of professionals that social workers in schools tends to work with more of the top tier of children, and the mana aki are more broader base tier of children. But as we know, post-pandemic, that's all just morphed into one big mess, really. And then we've got our family therapy team, and then we've got what we call our therapeutic care and education team, which is, we have a school on base for 5 of our centres. So we have children come to school with us for the day, and then they go home at night. Some children still have residential type care, so they stay 24/7, but it's a very targeted group of children, and we try not to do that. But if it's necessary, that's what we do, if we think that's going to be the most beneficial way to work with them. So we have 7 centres, 2 of which are just regional offices, not just, but they are regional offices. And then we have 5 that have a residential capacity, which we call villages. So it takes a village to raise a child.
I like that, yes. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. So,
and are they all across New Zealand, or are they all kind of just circled around in Christchurch?
No, so they're all across New Zealand. So we've got one up in northern Whangarei. We've got one based in Pakuranga. We've got one based in East Coast, Gisborne. We've got one based in Midland, which is Rotorua, and they have a family therapy in Tauranga. and then we've got our central regional, and then we've got Christchurch, which is a village, and then we've got our southern regional. So hopefully I haven't missed anyone out, but that's all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And at each of those, there's a range of sort of social workers, psychologists, and is there occupational therapists?
Yeah, so we're starting to, again, post the earthquakes, we've learned that we have to work differently with regards to our intervention. So we refine all the time, we evaluate all the time, we're measuring all the time to see what our impact is of our work upon with the tamaraki and the whānau. So we're looking all the time to improve. So we were a social work-based organisation for a long, long time, but we are progressively becoming more interdisciplinary. So in Christchurch, we have, at present, we have 4 psychologists, we have a music therapist, and we have an occupational therapist. And so that has been really interesting in the way we've rolled out SSP, actually. Using those professionals and developing SSP along with those professionals in very blended, intensive ways. And then we have SSP, which we're just rolling out as a standalone intervention. But, my understanding of SSP has always been that it is almost the pre-intervention intervention. And I talked to you before about TheraPlay. We brought in TheraPlay, and the reason that SSP came in was, one, I attended the 2018 Australia Childhood Trauma Conference, and myself and a colleague, Maria Louis, came back, and she was really inspired about safe and sound protocol, and I'd sort of just been, I had so much going on. But we ended up doing a master's thesis student came in, and she did her thesis with us around some group TheraPlay. And what we found were there were some children that just could not, their social engagement systems were so compromised, they could not do this toing and froing. They would just shut down and absolutely freeze at the sight of being in a group or having to relate to someone. Children coming in here, you can imagine coming into a building full of adults, full of other children, and it's a big step. So we've really had to slow that process down. So we might work with children in the community with SSP before they come in here and introduce them much more slowly to being with people. So SSP really hit my radar when I saw that I was watching these children just so shut down or going off into fight flight so quickly because they've got really narrow window of tolerances that to social engagement, that they just could not function in schools, they weren't functioning in homes, they weren't functioning in any public arena really very well. So SSP became the thing that we started to look at.
And you guys have had it for quite a few years. When did you first start?
Yeah, so we started in 2019. We now have 40 practitioners that are trained and skilled up in using SSP. And they're across all of the teams. So we have a couple in the Swiss team, we have a couple in the TCE team, we have quite a few in the family therapy team. And so I've been more focused on looking at how we use it and how we roll it out. And so I've used it, I've become really interested in, I've got a trauma background myself, so I went through the years and years of 20 years talk therapy, and it must have worked because I've turned out okay, right? So it's obviously worked and it's worked well, but I really want to see people suffer that long, or people to be making all these mistakes along the way because they're not seeing the world through the same lens as someone that's not experienced lots and lots of multiple adverse events or
Yes,
trauma,
yeah.
however you want to frame it. So my goal is to really have impact when we've got them here, to have as much impact as we can to shift their perception of the world, their feelings within the world, their view of themselves in the world, their internal working models, to really have a good mark on that. And helping them to shift that so that they can go out and be successful in their school communities, be successful in their families. And certainly when we talk about the preservation of families, making sure they take out skills that they can take down to their children and do that differently, and then move through life on a different trajectory. Just trying to shift the trajectory. And one of the key things to shift that trajectory is relationship and people. And if you can't connect, if you can't see them as safe, then you've got very little hope of establishing those support networks around you that will increase that resilience, the resiliency. So I'm really targeted on these blended intensive interventions, so very much that multimodal approach. And if we look at the research with multimodal approach, it goes back to, I think I had some research on it, the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies and the Complex Trauma Task Force surveyed a whole lot of experts on trauma, and 84% of them said that trauma needs a phase-based sequenced therapy. So interventions that are tailored towards the symptom sets that children are presenting with, or adults are presenting with. And Silverstone put out some research 2016 that positive impacts could be attributed to cumulative intensive therapeutic interventions with diverse therapists. And we're really blessed at Tumaya, because you walk in the door and we've got every type of individual you can think of, with different age ranges, diverse ethnicities, diverse genders. We have a lot of our men doing some amazing therapeutic work with children. So we're really blessed to have that. So we should be using it.
Yes, yeah. So tell me a bit about then, with this thinking of a phased approach, and you said before that you really sort of saw, and we definitely speak about the SSP, that if we can have that in that initial phased approach. So how have you, sort of rolled out that within your organisation?
Yeah, so we started off with SSP, so that was the first thing that we sort of started to look at, and that, of course, as we started using it, we had to become familiar with polyvagal, Stephen Porges' neurobiology, the neuroscience, how the brain works. So we started with SSP, and some of our in our southern region, they started adopting the HRV biofeedback, so the IOM2. So they were doing that prior. And to think about it, in 2019, when we took on the SSP, it was still just the core. So, and it's been fantastic to watch it develop and transition into this, much more friendlier, user-friendly form that it is now, based on actual practitioners' feedback.
Yes.
So it's been really good. So at that stage, so they started using the HRV prior to the SSP to get them to be in that state of being able to self-regulate through a co-regulated, responsive relationship with the practitioner.
So I'm just going to jump in for our listeners. So the IOM2 is an interactive biofeedback program that really targets improving heart rate variability. I think heart rate variability is such a powerful, biofeedback based on heart rate variability is such a powerful way into the nervous system. So if people want to learn a little bit more about that, I did do a podcast with Dr. Stephen Porges, who was actually one of the kind of originator of actually developing algorithms to measure heart rate variability. And I've done a couple of trainings on just understanding like the nuts and bolts of what is heart rate variability and why is that relevant for us as practitioners to learn about that. And then how do we actually start to embed it as a biofeedback tool. So exciting that you've brought that up and that you're actually speaking about using it almost as a baseline before, or an intervention to help stabilize. Because for me, I see it's another vagal tone exercise to do prior to. I see it as such a powerful supporter for the safe and sound. So talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I hadn't been using it. Our southern team had been using it and harping on at me and saying how wonderful it was, and I was just going, yeah, I'm busy. I'll get to it. But we've just recently got the IOM2, and it is just so easy to roll out as well. It is very easy to understand, to adjust for tamariki, and we've used it with a few of our young people and they love it. So the journeys are really cool because we can also do some psychoeducation around them. So there's a beautiful one on forgiveness that, you know, we have a lot of children, and one of the key issues is bullying, being bullied, which creates a sense of lack of safety, that neuroception of, you know, lack of safety because they've just had it for so long, and don't believe it can be any different. But there's a beautiful one about forgiveness, and people listening to this will think, how do you get forgiveness? It's a big step. But educating them about, you know, all they have to do is listen to that little guided program, thinking about the people that are bullying them, and then manage their heart rate and their coherence score or their resonance score up while they're processing that. And as they do that, they build a bridge with planks. How beautiful can that be?
Yes.
You know, children being able to move stones with their breathing, and they think it's with their mind. So they're moving these stones. But they're beautiful little guided things, and they're through Wild Divine, I think. So, but yeah, so we're looking at using that. We're also starting neurofeedback. So we're very early on in our journey with neurofeedback. So we're also looking at the HRV and the IOM being useful prior to neurofeedback. So training, getting them to train their breathing and their resonance score up, and that state of relaxation, so that it's firmly embedded before we put them into neurofeedback.
And so you'll find when you do that, you'll actually get the momentum will be more so in the neurofeedback, because remember that vagus nerve goes up to the brainstem, goes up through the thalamus into helping. So a regulated, so higher resonance scores, meaning you've got more vagal tone, so you have bigger variability in the heart rate. But because that vagus nerve feeds up into the brain, that's impacting those brain waves, so they're going to be functioning in a more organized way as well. So great move to do it first and then do neurofeedback.
And that's what you've just provided is really good technical understanding. For us, it's about keeping the child still. Can get a good read. But helping them to manage their body and helping them to manage themselves is powerful. And so for our children, they come through very dysregulated, and same with their whānau, their family. They come through, their parents and their caregivers have not got those regulation skills either. So
have you been using the SSP then within a family network? Yes. So talk about how some of the ways that your organization has done that.
So we're doing it quite separately at the moment, but what we're doing is we may do SSP with the caregiver and the child together, or we prefer to do it separately but in parallel, because we find that for some of our tamariki, they come through, and you know how you have to have a secure based relationship. Sometimes the parent-child relationship's not there right now. right?
Mhm.
So we're starting right back at the beginning so that we can stabilize both, so that they can come together, and then they move into other interventions. So I talked a little bit about blending and that intensity, and that intensive nature of intervention. So I only had the core when I started, and I didn't know about the HRV. So I do a scripted hypnotherapy, clinical hypnotherapy. So that's to reduce body tension and also to build confidence and ego strengthening. So working on their internal working model. So I used to use that in conjunction. So I'd do an SSP session and then go straight into a session of hypnotherapy. And I found that for parents, because I only had the core, for parents, I could smooth out the abruptness of the change that might have come, right? And I found that when I did SSP myself, because I did have a trauma background, I ended up having to do it 3 times, because I only had the core then, and I only had the understanding of the core. And so it was so abrupt for me. It changed my perception of the world around me, my perception of myself, how I moved through the world. And it was too abrupt for me. But we've all learned from that, thank goodness. And we've now got this extended version, which is much softer. But I still pair SSP with hypnotherapy at times, especially if children have a lot of subconscious body tension that is habitual. And I know the HRV and the IOM and the SSP can work on a lot of that, but it also helps with the subconscious drives of this is how it should be, and this is how it's always going to be, and this is how I am. I was built this way. So I still do a bit of that. And then we did a lot of blending with SSP and then going into music therapy.
I was going to ask you how, when you brought up before about the team that has the music therapist, the OT, and the psychologist, and you said things are a bit kind of interesting in that. So I wanted us to get back to have you, what is interesting about that?
Yeah, so with the music therapy, we did that primarily because we had the SSP with the understanding that it's going to switch on the social engagement system. So we wanted them to go into something that rewarded that social engagement system activation straight away in a very responsive, rhythmical, caring, brain-friendly way. And so then they would have an hour of music therapy, which children could really interrelate with a very responsive, attuned therapist for an hour. But also doing some of that rhythmical stuff, which was in line with the music of the SSP, but coming back to the real world music that they could create themselves, they could move, they could use their body, they could use their voice, they could use all these other components. And we could see big differences in these children when they were doing that as well. We didn't do any pre and post measuring, but we just did it out of curiosity and found that was a really nice blend.
But I think that makes so much sense if you can have that intense model. So here we have kind of opened up all this neuro possibilities with what the SSP, and then often in a traditional therapy sense, people will leave the office, and yes, you've tried to maybe give education about polyvagal therapy to parents and to help with that co-regulation, but to immediately go then into another allied health session to sort of solidify all that sort of possibility that's a really nice move. It's a nice model.
And with our children, they tend to get under people's skin pretty quickly. And so if we were sending them back to school, or if we were sending them back to a very unstructured play situation, quite often they'd be quite sensitive after SSP. They'd end up in a meltdown or something would go wrong. So we wanted to soften that re-entry back into the world as well. And it worked. It worked.
Yes,
so
it makes total sense. Yeah. Great news.
So we did that, and we would also mix it with drama. So getting them, and drama as a not formal drama, just dress ups. They would go and dress up. So some of our children that didn't speak after SSP would go in and put on a bee costume, or I'll never forget one little boy. He didn't speak much at all, and if it was like, I don't need to answer your questions. They are intrusive. So he was very bright, but his social engagement system was so compromised. He couldn't look at you when he spoke. His body was hunched and stressed when he spoke. So he'd most often opt not to speak. But I remember him doing SSP, and then he went in and dressed up as a queen bee. I came in and he'd never really mentioned my name at all. I didn't even know if he knew my name. And he had this wand and he said, Petria, bow down. I am the queen and you must listen to my command. And he did it in this strong, powerful, commanding voice. And it was incredible. It was incredible to watch. I just went, yes, yes. Inside, when you just do that yes inside, thinking he's got it. So pairing it up with just dress ups, something as simple as dress ups, thinking, what are we trying to nurture here? What are we trying to create here? And it's certainly around that social engagement system, curiosity, play, all of those sorts of things. So with some of our older boys, some of our 12-year-old boys that are quite violent to their mums, we've used SSP paired with TheraPlay. So we've done 5 days core and then gone straight into 5 days intensive TheraPlay, where they come every day and do a 5-day intervention with their mum and a dyadic, because TheraPlay is dyadic. We do it with the parent and the child. And so we might put the parent on SSP, the child on SSP, and then bring them together in a dyadic intervention. And so we've been able to see the violence drop off in that 10-day intervention completely.
So it sounds like it's very individual in terms of deciding what kind of intensive model that you work with when a new referral come in. Is that right?
Yeah, so we're trying to get better at that.
Yeah.
We haven't been great at it to date, but we're getting more and more informed about it. And, all the information that comes out of the trauma conferences from Bessel van der Kolk, Stephen Porges, Pat Ogden, Ruth Lanius, all of Dan Siegel, all of those people, we're consistently just absorbing it to try and figure out how we move forward. But we're also trying to look to what the children are bringing themselves. What are they bringing with them? Because all of our tamariki and our whānau come with powerful strengths. So we're trying to build on those strengths of resilience and helping them we're learning from them just as much as we're trying to imprint on their lives as well. They're leaving massive imprints on our lives with being able to understand better. And I think back, I've been in this business for a long time. So I think back that 20 years and I think, I thought I knew a lot then. How much don't we know now that we don't know we don't know?
I know, so yes, definitely.
Really in this place where I think we're very fortunate to have some of this technological support. We can look at the brain now. We can see how it's functioning or not functioning, how it's firing, not firing. We can see what people are bringing in symptomology. We can target that. So we're still really in that position of learning. And that's why we're turning to our Indigenous people as well. Māori bring with them so many natural things that they've been doing for generations and generations, which they've lost touch of. But the play, the music, the rhythm, karakia, prayer, waiata song, singing together, aligns your heartbeats. So we do
mhm,
waiata in the mornings, we do karakias in the morning. And so we're doing these things that are bringing people together into one space, one voice, one heart, moving forward. And so we're looking to all of those things and trying to learn from them and help to move forward. And we can just keep refining and refining.
Oh, what a great organization to be that open and that kind of, yeah, looking at all experiences as learning experiences and how do we help support people. I know the other technology that you guys have added is the focus system. So I know I've a couple of your OTs in focus. So how's that coming along?
So it started off, we got an OT in. We knew we needed an OT because what we found after the earthquakes is for the next 5 years after the earthquakes, we found that children, when they got distressed, would fall over. If they got distressed, they'd throw themselves on the ground. Children were running into walls. I mean, there was such vestibular and proprioceptive stuff going on that we didn't understand. We didn't know what was happening. And so we knew something was going wrong, but then we thought about it and we thought all of these children, we've got a whole generation of children, whether they've experienced more adverse events or not. They had all experienced the earthquake, but we had all these children that hadn't experienced the earthquake that were still growing up with, because after the earthquakes we had 5,000 more. You know, people don't talk about that. The earth just kept moving. And so we had all these children growing up in good families, good homes, responsive parents, everything there. They had food, they had everything else, but they were growing up learning to walk on shaky ground. It had to have some impact.
Exactly. Yeah, because you imagine how growing up, your nervous system trying to wire itself, knowing that the ground you walking on is unstable and unsafe. So yeah.
And one of our favorite TheraPlay activities that we had was jelly on a plate. And you had to do this jelly on a plate, and wobble your body all over the space, trying to get them to turn this into a playful reenactment of something safe and fun. But so SSP, we knew about the auditory stuff, but we also brought in the OT to work on the SSP. So she works with SSP. We know the importance of sensory profiling now. And even outside of the earthquakes and everything else, we know that based on what we know is that in Perry's work of neurosequential development, we know that, you know, the sensory integration system is the first to be developed. And if in utero, we have a lot of tamariki that come through, you know, where the adverse events have occurred in utero. And there's been high toxicity levels within and toxic stress within the uterus. So they're coming into this world already wired.
Hypersensitive nervous systems.
With really sensitive nervous systems, you know, really narrow window of tolerances to any stimulation. So sensory profiling, we find that there are some differences there. So our OT is very good at doing a sensory profile, doing some and being able to target the work more. We're also looking at different measures that we can, because I know focus is about, I don't know much about focus. I haven't done the training. So she's taken the lead on that, and she's going to look at how we roll that out. And at the moment, we're trying to refine the process so we don't have to do all 40 sessions. I'm guessing we're starting to be able to target, can this person start here, or can this person start here? So I'm quite limited in my ability to speak to it because it's all in her head, and she just sounds back to me. So, so we're trying to problem solve at the moment how we can really use that program in a very time efficient but effective way as well with some of our children.
And she can certainly get back with me to bounce some of the things that she's seeing, and I can give her guidance on how she can sort of modify those programs to make them a little bit more sort of fitting into some more manageable time constraints.
Yeah. So we also have somebody down in our so our OT is Lauren Ego, and down in our southern team is Tamia Walsh, and she started with Focus before we did. Our southern team are really onto it, because they're in their cars and they have to travel these long distances to get to their people. So they have lots of time in their cars to think about these things, I reckon.
I remember meeting Tamia, yes.
But they're very proactive and very innovative down there too. So they have started with Focus, and the person that picked it up and just loves it is Tamia. And she did her OT training, but she never quite finished. So she's now a social worker. But she does the Focus and the SSP and therapy, and all sorts of other things as well. But she's one of our therapeutic practice leaders down there. And then we've got Maria, who started, so she's setting all this up in our Auckland village and getting it all kicked off and running up there. So we have key people across the villages that take hold of them and just really start to work out how to best use them, because all of our populations are quite different as well. So how does it fit with the populations that we have?
Yes,
So
what a very creative organisation.
We are very, very blessed to have a national leadership team that are very vision driven. They listen, they think, they research, they listen to the people that have the feet on the ground, and so there's lots of communication, and nobody it's not a hierarchical organisation. It's seen as we all serve each other, and so whoever's doing what is a source of information and expertise and skill and whatever else. So we're really blessed to have that type of organisation. Hence why I've been here so long. Why would you leave, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can be creative, you can expand, you can and to work in an organisation where your ideas can be embraced and problem solved about how can we make that work. It was lovely. It sounds like a very almost like a polyvagal informed kind of organisation about understanding, making your staff or helping your staff feel safe so they can share their ideas.
There was a whole lot of stuff that came out of the lockdowns, where there were a couple of us, Maria, the music therapist at that time, and myself were quite concerned about our team because they were really struggling. So we did a lot of stuff online. We did lots of silly stuff from hand puppets to whatever we could think of. And so that's why I was glad when SSP became more remote driven as well. We can also do that. We tend not to because we don't have to here, based in Christchurch, but it's also expanded that accessibility out. And I think we'll be able to do that with the IOMs as well. In some way, we'll be able to get people access that can't get in and get them training themselves and supporting that. But because we're such a big organisation as well, we are really blessed to have people that fund us things as well. We're government funded, but we also get people that contribute stuff. We've got cupboards of toys and bikes we get gifted, and people just know to gift us stuff because they know we have that connection. So we're always open to that because it goes straight back to our tamariki and our whānau.
Lovely.
It gives them access to those more physical resources as well, which are also important to feel safe, right?
So what would you say in terms of, so how long will a family or a child typically engage in your organisation?
So for each service, that's different. So they will have a different funding stream, which dictates how they work. And how long they can work. I know our family therapy team has a very small client base, a caseload. So I think they have up to 8 cases at a time, which means that can be problematic with a wait list.
Right.
So it's about and that's why I'm keen to be, we need to know what we're doing when we're getting in there. We need to know what our goals are, what our purposes are. We need to take some measures at the beginning. Did we achieve them? If we haven't achieved them, then what do we do next? If we're working in very purposeful ways, then we should be able to keep it effective and efficient and timely. Because every time we're working, so for some families, people have worked with them for up to 2 years. We have children come in and out for their whole, so in the village, it's a 5 to 12 years. In family therapy, it's 0 to 18 years. So that makes a difference. But with some of our children, they come back to us as mentors.
Nice.
And if you come to Christchurch, we're right on the top of the hill, and when the sun hits us, we sparkle. So children can look up and say, I've been there, I know that place. And they have this, so children, we've got adults that come back to us and say, I was here as a child. I mentioned that I had a trauma background. My own children came here, when I was much younger. So I think, it has such a history that we have parents that come back and offer to do things for us, or we've got a grandparents group. I maybe will talk out of turn because I don't know all the details about these, but we have this lovely group of women that come in that hand knit things for our family. So it's a real village. When we're talking village, it's a village.
Yes, lovely.
So we never disconnect from our children and our whānau, and they can always come back. So it's about, but what I'm talking about is when they're here, we want to make sure that we're creating a sense of hope through change and positive impact. Right?
Yes.
And we want to start making an impact on the generation after. So that family preservation, we're talking about that preservation of moving through the generations and having that impact. So it's getting better and better. And I think we've been missing that since I started in this work. I think, I've been in here long enough to see a couple of generations come through now. And so, I just want to do better. Right?
No, I think you're exactly right, because I've been a clinician for a long time too, and it was very much the focus, when I was a younger clinician, you come in, you worked with the child, you gave some behavioral strategies to the family, and then you kind of, you got to the child to a point where they're kind of holding their own, they're doing okay at school, and you go, okay, then you kind of transition out of therapy. But I think obviously we're working with a lot more trauma now, but trying to make that change so as the kids grow up, that their parenting style is safer. It's a different. You're making that change in the generations to come.
Yeah. And so I think certainly the interventions, I've never come across interventions like I have in the last 3-4 years. They're just fast-paced, coming out, much more refined. And I think we've lost that fear of having to have something perfect before we do use it. And that's what I loved about SSP, because Stephen Porges says, let's get it out there, let's research it as we go, we'll figure it out, and it'll get better and better and better. And sure enough, it has been. And it's been refined on real-time information. Okay, the core's not working for our adults. What are we going to do? We need to extend it out. We need to make it a softer approach. We need to, and so it's really come from the practitioners that are using it themselves.
And obviously you guys have been seeing nice shifts and changes, the fact that you have over 40 therapists trained in it. So it's nice to see that it's getting utilized in that way.
Yeah. And I have to give a shout out to Beverly Flitton. She is the one that brought it to New Zealand really originally.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a conversations, and she supported us in having the confidence to move forward and really to make the decision that, yes, that's what we're going to do, and that's how we're going to move forward. So I do need to acknowledge her as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Beverly's a bit of a powerhouse of helping to promote polyvagal theory. And I know there was recently the New Zealand Trauma Conference that she was behind really. And you were involved in that too, weren't you, Petria?
Yeah, we had 2 presentations, talking about multimodal interventions in regards to complex trauma, and also expressive arts and music therapy in relation to trauma. So we've got some really good skills. Post the 2018 trauma conference, we knew what we had to do, but it's taken a long time to actually build up the skill of the people to do it.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
You can say, yeah, that's what we do, but then you've got to get the right people skilled up to be able to do really good work. So
yeah, and you're right, you've had quite a stream of traumas kind of nationwide. And I remember speaking to, I think it was Beverly who was talking to me and sort of saying that a lot of kids were just like being hypersensitive to wind. And when they would sort of hear the wind start to escalate, then they would sort of go into shutdown or fight flight mode. So there was these hypersensitive auditory systems, which I think that's why she really wanted to sort of see what could SSP bring, but just really highlighted the impact of a natural disaster on the nervous system and for children, for trauma for children.
Yeah, definitely. And I've used it with my granddaughter. So I had one of the practitioners with my granddaughter. So we've had shared care with my granddaughter since she was born, and we've just gone into full-time care with her, and she's 7. So she had her first SSP when she was 5. And then she had a car accident in which I was in as well. And she said, Nana, I think I need to do SSP again. So I said, okay, look, let's do SSP again. And then since then, she's unfortunately, which initiated her coming into full care, as she had another trauma. And so she was saying to me just this morning, I says, I've got to do a podcast. She said, what's the podcast about? And I says, SSP. And she says, oh, that's good, Nana. That's a good thing. She says, actually thinking about it, I think I need another dose. I says, okay, we'll arrange it.
Isn't it funny how kids, especially when you're given them with a bit of education, they just know they like how it makes them feel. I just had a young, she's in year nine. So she did the SSP, sort of a lot of stress within the families, 18 months ago. And she had been doing a bit of the focus on and off, and made huge changes for her, just feeling safer going to school and more engaged in school learning, listening in school. So she's, not having to go home and stress about trying to rehearse what she learned. Going out, she'd always be in her room, just being on the computer. Now she goes out, she goes to her friends to the gym. But she just recently sort of told her parents, I think I need to do SSP again. And I remember talking to her beforehand. She goes, I can't put my finger on it. I just know it made me feel good. And I feel like I just need a bit of resourcing. So awesome. Year 9. Amazing.
Yeah. I think children are quite intuitive, and certainly they feel the shifts in a different, more subtle way for most children. But I think post-pandemic, everybody should be doing it. I think we've underestimated the effects of COVID on ourselves and our social engagement system, especially being masked up for a lot of the time. I was training some people from infant mental health, and they were talking about how the babies born into lockdown are quite different and struggling. So, we really need to look at, I just think post the lockdowns and post the COVID, everybody should do a dose of it, really.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But you think about it, even the kids who were going to school, that they were seeing adults masked up, and then their parents were telling them, you know, don't touch this, don't touch that, don't be too close to your friends, don't. So people were basically they're giving messages that people were essentially unsafe to be close and be around. And yeah, I think I totally agree that we need to really be resourcing this generation coming through and helping foster that social engagement system, because there was a big kind of tragic interjection in that for them. Definitely.
And it made our children scared of people. And people and relationships are the resiliency factor. Like it's the big part of the resiliency factor, and with SSP it's definitely changing the way our children perceive the voices, perceive the faces, all of those things that Stephen Porges talks about. We see it in action. We can see these children, because the children that are coming to us, we just had a boy just then before this, just moaning and groaning on the stairs, and you could hear the hurt in his voice. He had no words because he was in self-defense. Mechanism was off and going, system was activated. No words, but the groan that was coming out of him was just so eerie, and you could see us all just being pulled in. We were being pulled in by this cry from within him. And so he's one of the ones that we're working towards getting to SSP. But at the moment you couldn't put headphones on his head, so we have to be quite creative about how we do that. But we'll get there. We'll get there, and through lots of different combinations, we'll be able to get him to that point. And so it's really satisfying, and really it provides hope. You know, like I said, I've been a practitioner for a while, and change was so slow you couldn't really see it. But now we're starting to see shifts. And the shifts can happen in a day, they can happen in an hour, they can happen in a week, they can happen in a month, but they're happening and we can see them.
And I think that's the gift that these sort of technologies help bring to therapy, doesn't it? In terms of creating a lot of change more quickly than what we could through all our therapeutic tools. And I know that's been my personal journey using these sort of tools. And I love that what you said before about during the pandemic, how you recognize you needed to help support your staff by doing get-togethers to help resource their nervous systems so they could help their clients. So I love that. Are you guys still doing things like that at all, or?
Lots. That was one of, I think Maria up in Auckland still does some stuff like that, because Auckland has been quite different. They were in lockdown a lot longer than us. They were months and months. And also they've just had the floodings and the cyclones and those sorts of things. So they've been hit with a few things lately. So I know there's people that are doing that. But the other part of me rolling out, or my work to roll out some of these multimodal interventions, is something that's really understated, is vicarious trauma, or secondary trauma, or whatever you want to call it. But as we work with children that have these adverse events in their life, we have to hear them, we have to live them with them, we have to listen to that groan on the stairs, and that activates our system. And it can traumatize our system, or really affect our nervous system. So a lot of the things that we're rolling out, I want people to be able to heal as they are healing. So being able to access some of those things for themselves, and being able to do their own healing as they are healing. And with TheraPlay, we do sunshine circles every day in the morning. With waiatas, with karakias, we're healing together. And that's what we learned out of the earthquakes, that community heals better and faster together, not individuals within a community. And so and it takes us off the expert level, we're people alongside people. We're human to human connected. and we're connected through our nervous systems, right? So that's a powerful statement for our clients that are often, well, our families that have been, condescended a lot and made given powerlessness within their healing journeys. And especially with trauma, because the key message for trauma is it's not you, it's what's been done to you. There's nothing wrong with you at all. You've responded in a very natural, healthy way to survive. Want to help you to get unstuck. You might not need that right now,
I
so
love that.
So it's where that polyvagal theory and therapy comes in. Embedding everything in that is a very powerful way. So we do a lot of Deb Dana stuff. I do myself. And she's got that beautiful flip chart. Have you seen the flip chart?
Yes,
it's really awesome. So just taking our whānau through those flip charts and being able to get them to understand their own systems rather than blaming and being angry at or being shameful that their systems kicked in is powerful in itself. Real powerful.
So I'm aware of our time, and I was going to ask you, do you have any sort of closing thoughts or that you want to sort of share with listeners?
Yeah, well, I think that's what I've been doing.
I know that's what I was going. I thought I didn't want to sort of summarize what you were just saying, but I thought let me just sort of there might be something else in your role. But was there anything else besides? I mean, I think this idea of building a community and it's a village that helps create change and security. I think that is huge. I think a lot of soul practitioners sort of need to sort of file that away and think, how do I work to help build that sort of community, and Deb Dana's resources is great. Anything else you think you'd like to share?
I guess everything that we've talked about is really leading up to that community, healing within community, healing within relationship, having a diversity of intervention, having that phased, sequenced approach rather than this rigid approach. I mean, even Lazarus that developed CBT talks about having a phased sequence approach, with regards to trauma or adverse events. So thinking out of the box and moving with the children, moving with the families, and stepping down from that. We are the experts. This is all new. We're on this adventure. We're journeying together, I think is really important message to be giving to the people that we work with, and that there's nothing wrong with you, that actually you're responding in a very good way. So I think that's the key message I want to get across. And just finish on saying that anybody's welcome here. If you want to come and visit us, if contact our national leadership team if you're really keen to come and do some placement hours or something like that. We're always keen to have visitors, people that want to learn and grow with us, people that we can learn and grow off is always good too. So hopefully they don't mind and we don't have a flood of people, but people are always welcome to come.
I love that. And New Zealand is just a gorgeous part of the world. So I love that you added that. So that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that information. I certainly learned more about what your organization is striving to achieve, and it sounds like you're doing some amazing work there, definitely.
Yeah, and I want to thank you guys at ILS. You're very helpful, very easy to connect with. John, you're amazing. You just always get us everything on time and place and order. So it's just been so easy to work with you guys as well. So thank you as well.
Appreciate it. Yeah, excellent. I hope you all enjoyed my conversation with Petria. I love the cultural interweave in STAND, especially the emphasis on community to help with trauma recovery. I also really liked how Petria explained that they were implementing the Safe and Sound protocol directly followed by music therapy to further engage and strengthen the social engagement system. I really enjoy supporting practitioners and organisations implementing the Safe and Sound protocol. And I also support individuals and families in their own healing journey. If you would like more information about working with me, my email is joanne@integratedlistening.com.au.
If you'd like to learn more about the Safe and Sound protocol in Australia and New Zealand, please contact Integrated Listening Australia. The website is integratedlistening.com.au. And for the rest of the world, please contact Unite Integrated Listening at integratedlistening.com.